Have you ever noticed how elections seem to bring an entire country to a standstill? For a long time in Malaysia, that frantic countrywide pause happened neatly on a single day. But recently, that predictable routine broke apart, revealing a hidden tug-of-war over who actually holds the power. For roughly 60 years, Malaysian voters had a very straightforward schedule. Whenever it was time to choose the national government, the 13 individual states would hold their own local elections at the exact same time. One trip to the ballot box, 2 votes, and you were done for the next 5 years. To understand why this changed, it helps to think of the country like a giant corporation. The federal government in Putrajaya is headquarters. The 13 states are the regional branch offices. The Malaysian constitution acts as the company rulebook, dividing up who does what. It sorts responsibilities into 3 columns: the federal list for headquarters, the state list for the branches, and a concurrent list where they share duties. Headquarters handles massive items like defense and education. The branch offices manage local matters like land use, municipal services, and religious customs. But the rulebook is heavily tilted. Headquarters controls the money. They collect the income taxes, the corporate taxes, and manage the nation's major resources. The branch offices have very limited ways to raise their own funds. For decades, a single political coalition called Barisan Nasional controlled both headquarters and almost every branch office. Because everyone reported to the same boss, holding elections on the same day was just a matter of corporate convenience. It made the system look unified, even though the Constitution always allowed the branch offices to pick their own election dates. That quiet constitutional loophole was put to the test in November 2022. The Prime Minister dissolved the federal parliament, expecting the states to follow along as usual. Instead, 6 states flatly refused to dissolve their own assemblies. They had practical reasons to push back. The federal election was called right at the start of the annual monsoon season, bringing a serious risk of floods that could keep voters at home. Plus, these states were governed by opposition parties who simply didn't want to play by the Prime Minister's timetable. So the national election went ahead without them, and the results were highly fractured. No single group won a majority. At the same time, a massive surge of support for the Perikatan Nasional coalition swept through the northern and east coast states. People called it the Green Wave. After several tense days of negotiation, Anwar Ibrahim emerged with enough support to form a unity government, taking the top job at headquarters. By splitting away from the national timeline, those 6 states proved that the branch offices could legally defy headquarters. That single decision fractured the country's political calendar into a much more complicated schedule. 9 months later, in August 2023, those 6 rebellious states finally held their delayed local elections. This chart shows the financial toll of breaking the schedule. Running these separate state elections cost an estimated 420 million ringgit. If they had just held them alongside the national election in November, they would have used the same workers, the same ballot boxes, and the same schools. It would have added almost nothing to the federal budget. And here is the catch. The states don't actually pay for their own elections. The costs of setting up voting centers and paying election workers are covered entirely by the federal government. The states exercise their independence, but headquarters foots the bill. This leaves a lingering question. Was spending almost 500 million ringgit worth it for these states to finally get voters to focus entirely on local issues like town planning and water supply without the noise of a national campaign? The short answer is no, because the national government and the opposition were already locked in a bitter rivalry. The state elections didn't focus on local issues at all. Instead, they turned into highly expensive proxy wars, acting as a direct test of the new Prime Minister's performance. This brings us back to that relationship between headquarters and the branch offices. It turns out that having the right to pick your own election date doesn't mean much if you don't actually control your own bank account. This document shows exactly where the money goes. In recent years, the total amount of money headquarters gave to all the states combined was only about 2.5% of the entire national budget. Headquarters holds a near-total monopoly on the country's wealth. Because states have such shallow pockets, their local leaders are forced to rely on cash handouts and development projects approved by headquarters. A state government can't build major infrastructure or launch big programs without getting a green light from the top. This financial squeeze changes how people vote. Instead of looking at who will fix the local roads or manage the land, voters start using these local elections to send a message to the Prime Minister. It stops being about the state and starts being a report card for the national government. When the Constitution keeps the states on such a tight financial leash, it becomes very difficult for local issues to stay in focus. These state elections often end up turning into high-stakes popularity contests for whoever is currently running headquarters. Despite the costs and the distractions, this fractured timeline is likely here to stay. The East Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak are already operating on their own unique election schedules, due in 2025 and 2026. Meanwhile, peninsular states like Malacca and Johor might also trigger early polls of their own, just to avoid clashing with the next massive federal election in 2028. Decoupled, out-of-sync elections are now the permanent reality for Malaysian voters. The era of the single, unified voting day is over, but until the rulebook is updated to give these branch offices actual financial power, separating the schedules doesn't give them true independence. It just forces taxpayers to pay double the price for the exact same political drama.